Welcome everyone to the Club Dub Football Podcast. It's time for the recap show. All the stories, action and misadventure from the weekend's games all crammed into one great bite-sized spectacle. The guys are ready, so let's jump right in.
Welcome to the
Club Dub Football Podcast,
where the only question is,
does your team make it into the club?
Can he get in? No, he cannot!
Welcome back. Slightly less than normal, gentlemen. How are we doing? Just a trio of us this week as Aldrin ducks out of his duties on one of the most important NFL weeks of the season. But the three of us will deliver an absolutely stellar performance, I have no doubt, reviewing what I'm sure all three of us would agree is one of the best weekends of NFL playoff football potentially in history. If Saturday's games were dull, at least they were close. You know, without the offensive firepower, there were still some close games, but Sunday's games, well, they deserve a whole page to themselves in the history of NFL football. For my money, we've also got a number of bits of breaking news, but you know what? All that to come. How about I'll round up the scores from the weekend and then we can throw ourselves into discussion. So in terms of the weekend...
I'm as positive about the weekend as you were, Rob, but it was all right.
I don't know. It's still a chapter in the history of Brady. I mean, he nearly came back from 27-3 for a second time. I mean, can you imagine?
True.
You know, that was, you know, proper water into wine stuff. But yeah, anyway, I'll breeze past what happened to the Buccaneers. But let me do the rundown of the games from the weekend then. So the first game of the weekend, almost easy to forget it with what came after, was the Cincinnati Bengals having a field goal as time expired to see off a very stubborn Tennessee Titans. That one ending up 19-16 in Tennessee. The number one seeds from the AFC are out. The 49ers, well, they came in as a wild card and long shot in many people's eyes, but clearly nobody told Shanahan et al. In San Francisco because they went to the NFC's number one seed, the Green Bay Packers, and even in the snow and the freezing cold weather at Lambeau, they too had a field goal as time expired to win 13-10. Then the Rams of Los Angeles, will they travel at least to other hot weather territory heading to Tampa Bay? And in a game that can not really be summed up in a few seconds, it's another field goal as time expires in the most remarkable circumstance that saw the Rams, who were at one point leading, was it 27-3, win 30-27. And then you roll a little further down to arguably one of the greatest playoff games in NFL history. And it's easy to forget this too had a key field goal as time expired, but that was in regulation to tie it up for Kansas City and to take the game to overtime, where ultimately the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes put on a show to put themselves in their fourth consecutive AFC Championship game. Something to behold, and I can't wait to get to Bills Chiefs. But you know what? Let's stick with our format. There's no Aldrin, so JB, I'm going to throw over to you. What were your big takeaways from this remarkable weekend of NFL action?
I mean, I suppose my biggest personal takeaway is a bit of surprise. Everybody, and it's sort of, I think from you, Rob Rose, from people that I've spoken to at work who are fans of the NFL, to people you've seen online, have been raving about last weekend as the greatest weekend of NFL football ever. And it was, Sunday was great. I think people are confusing exciting results and exciting finishes in the final minute with exciting games, because I sat and watched those two Saturday games. They were not good. They were not fun. So, I mean, personally, that's where I was. I think to call out specifics, I think the Titans had a really good game plan. And you could see that every time it got to third down for the Bengals and Joe Burrow's got no time to do anything because that Tennessee front are swarming all over him and taking him down for 5, 6, 7, 8 yard losses every single time. So you can see why it was a close game. And just, I think, to reiterate a point that I made to you that I saw someone make online on the Saturday itself, it kind of cemented Ryan Tannehill, I think, as a quarterback that you can win with, but not win because. And that'll be an interesting thing to kind of track as the Titans roll on another season of being quite well considered in terms of progressing onwards and not doing anything. Somebody on this podcast made mention of the facts that the Green Bay Packers have issues with their special teams. And, well, it was me and I was right because how can you have that Green Bay Packers team that did all of that through the season and only score 10 points? And that touchdown was in the opening drive of the game. It was an absolutely shocking performance. And again, it does kind of bring back to, well, you know, Aaron, like the Packers have, what was it? We said the Packers had Brett Favre in 1992. It's now 2022. And in the intervening 29, 30 years, depending on when you're considering it, with Brett Favre and then Aaron Rodgers, the Green Bay Packers have 2 Super Bowls. Absolutely does not feel enough. And yeah, Rodgers played in the same time that we had the New England Patriots dynasty, but there's some questions there that you've got to answer it. Saturday was much better. Maybe we'll Sunday was much better. Maybe we'll let Phil talk about Sunday.
I think you made a valid point going back to the Packers game. You said, you know, the special teams weren't very good, but you can't put 10 points up in a game and blame the loss on special teams. Like they just got nothing going. And I wonder if the San Francisco 49ers, who are 4-0 against Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers, regret not drafting him yet. Something tells me probably not, as their second NFC Championship game in 3 years.
There's a weird thing about the Saturday, though, because, I mean, I'm kind of with you, JB, but there are people out there who love defensive football. You know, I mean, you as a fan of the Steelers, I mean, there are many Steelers fans who would tell you the best Steelers teams were built on those remarkable defenses. And we saw, certainly in the Titans-Bengals game, no time for 2 quarterbacks to settle on either side of the ball. So you did see great defensive play if there were offensive miscues. But I'll agree with you, definitely the most uneventful, I thought it was tense, but I'll agree, uneventful kind of game in a weird way. The Packers game, I think, is a bit more interesting because what San Francisco did in the conditions. I mean, you look at not only the number 1 seed at home at Lambeau, but also that weather. I mean, that isn't San Francisco weather. And I thought the 49ers, I mean, it was a weird game because on the one hand, you could imagine that they would have been, you know, absolutely, well, the Packers should have really been out of sight if it wasn't for all the errors they had in the first half. You know, they really could have, you know, taken any chance of winning that game away from the 49ers inside the first kind of, 25 minutes of game time. But I kind of thought it was interesting the way it came back. I kind of loved the ending as well. I thought the 49ers story is maybe an interesting one too. But yeah, you know, it leads to a lot of drama for this weekend when you think the number 1 seed, both AFC and NFC side, are now going to be watching from home. But yeah, I don't know. I think I maybe feel differently about the Bengals and whether they truly are good enough. I know they beat the Chiefs at the end of the regular season, but whether they truly are good enough to win a Super Bowl after what I saw at the weekend. But I don't feel any less positive about the 49ers. I think in the conditions, there were some good takeaways for San Fran.
I think I would absolutely love the 49ers to go on and win the Super Bowl because then it becomes a difficult off-season when you think about all the, you know, the consensus is they're going to move on from Jimmy Garoppolo. But if he takes you to a Super Bowl and wins a Super Bowl, you know, it's hard to then toss him aside and say, thanks, but no thanks, we're going to go forward with Trey Lance. So I think that'd be really interesting. And obviously, I also don't want the Rams to go to the Super Bowl in their own stadium. I don't want the Rams to progress after they beat us this week.
The Bucks will always be the first team to do it, Phil. Don't worry.
Very true.
You'll always have the T-shirt and the merch to prove it. You do make I'm trying to think about the last time a Super Bowl winning team moved on from their quarterback, and I mean, Trent Dilfer Ravens is the one since. I don't know. I mean, it feels. I don't know. It would be odd, wouldn't it? But I think it will happen. I think if the 49ers win the Super Bowl, I can still see them moving on from Jimmy G. And yeah,
I mean,
also
there will be, just on that note,
Mm.
so there will be some of our dedicated Club Dub podcast listeners out there that will be referring to the 2015 Denver Broncos as a team that moved on from their starting quarterback. But I don't think that really, just to call it out, I don't think that counts.
They didn't move
Yeah,
on,
I was
did
going to say the quarterback moved on. I don't think, if I'm not sure, Dilfer was affected. Was he traded? I think he was, wasn't he? Did he go Ravens, Seahawks? I'm trying to think the chronology of his career now. But I mean, Dilfer's the last one I can think of being traded. And the only thing that makes me feel Garoppolo would be a bigger story is I think the Ravens were all about defense, weren't they, that team? And on offense, it was more the running game. I don't think Dilfer was bad, but he wasn't the superstar of that team, whereas I think Jimmy G probably does carry a bit more on his shoulders. But I mean, a bit like Rodgers, I mean, it's funny you said Ryan Tannehill is a guy that you can win with, but not a guy who'll win the big games, and not a guy who'll put it on his shoulders. I don't think Tannehill was any worse than Aaron Rodgers on Saturday. I think Rodgers looked, I don't know, really ordinary and just gobsmacked by the finish, I think. The pictures of him on the sideline, it was just disbelief, I think.
Yes, but I think you can sum that up as maybe Aaron Rodgers having a bad game, whereas Ryan Tannehill kind of just had the performance that you would expect Ryan Tannehill to have. Like in starting both halves with his first pass being picked off for an interception is an incredibly Ryan Tannehill thing to do. But to just call back to kind of what we were talking about there, Dilfer only played a season with the Ravens. It was that Super Bowl season. They did release him, so it wasn't they traded or anything like that.
Or was he released?
Yeah. Ravens just decided to move on and kind of it was acknowledged as like the terminology used about Dilfer is he's not elite, but he doesn't make costly mistakes and was supported by a dominant defense. Ryan Tannehill isn't elite, made costly mistakes, and was trying to be supported by a dominant defense. Now, we've spoken before about the fact that if you take Derrick Henry out of that Tennessee Titans team, how long can they go on for? And they managed to do okay. They managed to secure the number 1 seed. But when they got him back, I mean, did they even get him back? Like, was that Derrick Henry?
That's what I mean. I think they did better than okay securing the number 1 seed. I mean, they missed him for a long time. He was out significantly. But I'm with you. I think he didn't look 100%. And I thought the run game had kind of held up pretty well in his absence. But equally, it's one of those things where you wouldn't necessarily blame Vrabel if he was thinking a couple of games ahead, try and get Henry up to speed for a potential, AFC Championship game or Super Bowl. I understand the theory, but yeah, he didn't quite look, a couple of good runs, didn't he? But didn't quite look himself. A weird Saturday. I've mentioned it. PB, you first. What do you think of the Bengals after that performance? They came out of the regular season red hot, looked, I thought, pretty good, finding their way past the... I mean, are they Super Bowl contenders? Is there still the why not us storyline in Cincinnati? Do you think that holds water as an argument?
I think they're in the AFC Championship game, so you have to consider them contenders. I think they are the one team that are left that don't have the burden of expectation. I think the Rams are all in this year. They went and got ABJ, they got Von Miller. Oh, Sean McVay's the coach. He's so great and all that kind of stuff. Again, not bitter.
Not at all.
You've got the Niners who went to the Super Bowl 2 years ago. You've got the Chiefs who, have been in the last 2 Super Bowls, won one, lost one. The Bengals are the only ones. I mean, if we go back to our early season, discussion, I don't think any of us had the Bengals even making the playoffs. And now they're in the AFC Championship game. So I think, yes, they're a contender because, 4 weeks ago, they beat the Chiefs. And they're coming up against the Chiefs again. I don't expect the Chiefs to let them rack up as many points as they did in that game. But who's to say that they're not going to? That will play on their minds, I'm sure. I think they're a young, exciting team. They've got nothing to lose. If they go out here, then everybody goes, wow, they outperformed massively. They made the AFC Championship game, brilliant job. If they make it to the Super Bowl, then, on any given Sunday, say I think you've got to consider them contenders, and they're an exciting team to watch. I would quite like to see them do it, just because what a story that would be, going from one of the worst teams in the league last year, or the last however many years, to then going all the way this year. But I think it has the makings of a good game. I'm not sure whether it will eclipse the Chiefs versus the Bills from Sunday, but, it's got the potential to be a real high scorer.
Yeah, I think a lot of the discussion around the Bengals and them, can they really go any further, kind of focuses a lot on what was a game where the Titans absolutely minimized everything the Bengals could do, and kind of disregards a lot of the season that came before it. And kind of just like the conversation we just had in comparison to Aaron Rodgers versus Ryan Tannehill, we said then you have to consider the whole width and breadth of the season as a whole. And like we've used as an example before, the Bengals didn't all wake up Saturday morning and forget how to play football like they've played it for the season before. They just woke up and went against the Tennessee team that were extremely well coached and had a really, really good game plan. Now, the Chiefs are going to go in with exactly the same thing, but hopefully what the Bengals staff have shown is the ability to bounce back from that as well. They will learn from the mistakes. They'll improve the protections. Jumping a little bit ahead to talking about Sunday, kind of like we saw the Bucks have success with against the Rams. They started to really be able to move it when they left Gronk in to assist the right tackle, to give Brady some space to be able to throw it. I would expect that that's probably what the Bengals are going to do a little bit of, to kind of minimize that Chiefs pass rush and kind of prevent guys like Chris Jones from really impacting the game.
I think that's a fair shout, actually. I mean, I don't think this is particularly controversial. I think they faced a much better defense in the Titans than they'll face against the Chiefs. And I think beyond the pass rush, I mean, there are some good corners. There are some mobile linebackers. I think safety, they were without Tyrann Mathieu, weren't they, at the weekend? And immediately that whole kind of safety area looked pretty suspect against the Bills. But yeah, there are ways to attack the Chiefs, just like I suppose the Titans showed there are ways to attack the Bengals. I like your point, Phil, about the weight of expectation for Cincinnati, the fact they've got everything to gain and nothing to lose. The only thing is we've seen these young teams flash before, and I just think there's no guarantee you ever make it back. That's the thing I always have in mind. When teams lose the Super Bowl, and I remember the Cardinals losing the Super Bowl to the Steelers, and I think it was Chris Collinsworth, if memory serves me, going, what a great, run the Cardinals had. They'll be back next season. And you can't predict that in a 32-team league and the way the NFL is. Those chances that you either take or don't. JB, we had a chat on Sunday about Dan Marino, who, a bit like Joe Burrow, made the Super Bowl in his second season, I think, and never got back. He went on to have a stellar career that, can be judged by a lot of measures outside of a Super Bowl ring. But yeah, I'd love the Bengals to grab the opportunity. But look, Saturday I thought deserved airtime. Let's throw ourselves into Sunday, because where do you even begin? Let's go chronologically, which takes us to Bucks Rams. Phil, I know it didn't end the way you might have wanted, but did you see that second half performance at all? Did you see that defense stiffening? Did you see that offense suddenly finding its groove after what looked as abject a first half as I've seen in a long time from Brady and co?
Yeah, absolutely not. I think we were, at 27-3, because of where Brady's been before and because of the talent that we've got, even with the injuries that we've had, I don't think you're ever out until, you're 5 scores down in the fourth quarter or something like that. But no, I never saw that coming. I thought the Rams had that sewn up. Even going into the fourth quarter and late in the fourth quarter, I think when we were a touchdown behind, you then thought, we're just not going to quite get there. But to watch that comeback was absolutely bonkers, because it's not like it was even a straightforward, we just kept getting them to go 3 and out, and we were sailing it down the field. Brady fumbled it, and turned it back over to the Rams, and you think, oh, that'll be that then. And then the next play, because of the noise in the stadium, they have that failed snap that flies past Stafford, and JPP's quick off the mark and gets there to, to recover the fumble, which then puts us in great field position. It's mad how they were so poor in the first half to be so good in the second half is it was just an unbelievable game. You couldn't believe it as you're watching it. And then to think we've left 47 seconds on the clock. Stafford almost fumbles it, on their first play. For them to, for us to give Cup that easy play up the middle, and then the one to secure the field goal, just running that zero blitz when they have to throw it deep. I just don't understand what Todd Bowles was thinking. Why not chuck everybody back into coverage? They have to go deep to have any chance of getting the field goal. I still don't understand it now, but it is what it is, and it happened. And Matt Gay came back to bite us, having been a kicker that we cut a couple of years ago. They beat us last season with the last second field goal from Matt Gay, and they've done it again, in the playoffs this year. So, but yeah, what an absolutely bonkers game. And no, I didn't expect that comeback to happen.
Well, I think if you listen to Bruce, the issue with the defensive call at the end there was the fact that half of the guys did one thing and half of the guys did something completely different. And there is going to be some analysis on that, of the fact that, was it a bad defensive call or was it just bad defensive communication that led to it? But I think you're right in terms of the fact that, like, we didn't see this game coming, like this result and this end coming at all. The first half, with respect to the Bucks, was terrible. Like they couldn't move, they couldn't get the ball going, they couldn't get downs. It looked like the absolute worst possible time to turn up at a game and absolutely lay an egg. And then just like we talk about those those moments you have when when the Rams pulled it to 26-3, and you've got like 50% of the audience and like that on Twitter and social media and everything being like, go for two, go for two, go for two. And you've got the other half going, absolutely under no circumstances do you go for two. Do not make it 28-3. To then manifest that comeback almost out of the air. It was almost as if Brady was like, well, it's 1 point less than last time. Let's go. And go they did. And it would have been so Tom Brady, which does sound like a Disney Plus kids show, to just have that kind of moment and be like, well, okay, well, we've done this before. And when you tied it up and you're looking like you're going to go into overtime, I sort of just remember just saying to Rob, I think this is crazy, after also having apologized for shouting ball at quite a loud volume when that last fumble was called and potentially waking up his kids. Disappointing from a personal point of view that the Bucks didn't go through, both because I know Rob didn't want the Rams to win, and Phil, you didn't want the Rams to win. But it lines up a very good game. And ultimately, I was going to say ultimately the better team won. And I'm not entirely sure that that's accurate. I don't think it's that the better team won. And I think maybe in both cases, it was just the team that didn't run out of time won.
The weird thing about the halves is I felt, and maybe Phil will feel different when, you got a vested interest in one team, but as a neutral, I felt in the first half, the Buccaneers were outplayed. I actually, for the first time, I kind of thought, hold on, it makes so much sense. The Rams have Von Miller. He really looked a factor in that game for me the first time watching them this season, that I really felt he stood out. But the weird thing about the second half is, yes, the Bucs got going, did some amazing things. I mean, that touchdown throw where Evans outpaces Jalen Ramsey is a brilliant play in the circumstances and with what it meant in the context of the game. But the Rams were just error-strewn. I mean, the fumbles, the turnovers, and was it, it was Cam Akers, wasn't it, who had the fumble on, was it the 1 yard line at the end of the first half?
That was probably the turning point. That was the first
yeah,
half,
it was a weird game because you kind of, in the second half, Sean McVay continues to run with Akers, and I think was it Chris Collinsworth who was on commentary. I'm trying to think who the colour guy was on commentary, and he mentions specifically, this is great from Sean McVay because how did the first half end? It ended with Cam Akers, and actually that fumble was a bit of a fluke. It's a weird thing, isn't it, to land on your head, all that stuff. But I mean, he's going, it's great. He's still trusting Akers with the ball. And then Akers ends up coughing up another, only having the ball in one hand, under one arm in the circumstances. And in that kind of game, it's situational football. I'm not sure that is a masterstroke, by McVay. And the thing that would worry me is, does any of this worry the Rams? Do they come out of that game feeling 100 feet tall, or do they come out of that game thinking, that's the worst second half we've played all season and we've gotten away with one? I don't know. The 49ers are kind of their bogey. It just feels like in a season where you've said, Phil, they're win or bust, they just seem to have had a game where they kind of demonstrated both in either half, really. A game where they showed what they can do and then tried almost as hard as they could to give it away.
Yeah, I think the difference in performance, the first half we couldn't get anywhere near Stafford, and it was almost like a revolving door, to get to Brady. I think Donovan Smith had his worst game in the 2 years that Brady's been there. He was absolutely terrible. And it showed the impact of losing Tristan Wirfs, what a loss he was, because, you've got Miller one side, Donald the other, and you just can't give extra protection on both sides. To make, to compound the issue, Josh Wells, who was in as backup at right tackle, he was struggling with an injury as well and had to leave the field to get that taped up. So even the backup is struggling on his 2 feet as well. So, but then second half they tightened up and were a lot better, and we managed to get to Stafford. Forget our O-line for a minute. Our pass rush in the first half was non-existent. And I think that, told part of the story in how easy it was for Stafford to move the ball. But I think that got going in the second half, which made things a lot better. But yeah, it really was, a tale of two halves from both teams, I think.
Just a crazy game. And in any other weekend of NFL action, that would be what everybody was talking about on, the Monday morning as they, got into the office at work or whatever the situation is, the water cooler sporting chat. And then the Rams get through. Like you said, actually, before I move on to that, I was kind of setting up to move on to the next game. Cooper Kupp is absolutely incredible. And I think as much as he got the Triple Crown this season, and, he's probably one of the names that people mutter, when they think about MVP candidates, certainly one of the few who isn't a quarterback this year. He just does so many things brilliantly. I mean, to be a slot receiver and to play as fast as he does, to be looking back for the ball when, you're running through traffic, to have that outright pace, to have those safe hands. I know he had a rather uncharacteristic drop, didn't he, in the game, but to end the game, you surely as a defense know that he's the guy Stafford would want to find, and to come up with those plays I thought was great. So Cooper Kupp is a bona fide superstar for me, and what a year he has had. What a year he could still have, I suppose. But like I say, that would have been the chat from everybody if it wasn't for what followed. And I'll say very little other than I thought the Buffalo Bills on offense were pretty much perfect. Not far away. And I mean, statistically, I think the QB rating for Josh Allen wasn't far off a perfect QB rating. I mean, they were pretty much perfect on offense and somehow lost. And I think you look at Mahomes and actually Tyreek Hill starting to come to the fore and think that is, from both teams, from both quarterbacks, a performance for the ages ultimately. What were your takeaways, JB, from Chiefs against Bills?
I thought it was very interesting, and this is how I summarized it to a couple of guys when I went into the office today. We saw last weekend on Super Wildcard Weekend that 14 seconds was not enough time to run a play and win a game. And then Sunday night, we saw that, was it 13 seconds is enough time to run plays and tie a game to put you in a position to win. And you see everyone has been discussing this game. And I think that is the game, that is the finish that has led everybody to talk about what an amazing weekend it was, because that was one of the best games ever. Like not best playoff games, not best Bills or best Chiefs games, not best Sunday night primetime, best games ever. And I think you're right. I think you have to credit the Chiefs for perseverance and for winning out in the end. But the Bills were right up there with them. Like you look at the scores and it's like neck and neck. It's 7-7 in the first, 7-7 again in the second, 7-9 in the third, and then 15-13 with the 6 in overtime to win it. That is two AFC superpowers. That's like, Rocky and Apollo Creed in the first game, first movie, just staggering each other but keeping on going. And you could see the resilience in the Bills, like that Kansas City score right towards the end of the third that looked like it was starting to pull ahead of the Bills, and then the Bills respond with that amazing 75-yard touchdown from Josh Allen to Gabriel Davis. And you could see this wasn't a team that were afraid of doing what they had to do. Neither team seemed to be scared of what the other team was doing. And I don't mean that in a way of disrespect or not taking it seriously. I very much felt like a kind of game where both teams were just looking at and saying, okay, cool, they've just scored, we're going to go and do the same thing now. To touch a little bit on kind of the controversy, air quotes, of how unfair it was that we got to overtime and Mahomes got the ball first and the Chiefs went on to win, and Josh Allen didn't get to take the field again. And ultimately, that's what overtime rules are. If the Bills wanted to give Josh Allen the opportunity to take the field and try and win the game, the Bills defense needs to stop Patrick Mahomes. And that is an incredibly unfair statement. And to make of that Bills defense that I thought did really well to contain them, that, did really well all season. They were the number one defense in the NFL. But you can't just put it on all of them, because if you say, oh, well, the Bills should have stopped the Chiefs. It's like, well, the Bills or the Chiefs should have stopped them at any other point in any of the preceding 60 minutes that happened there. So I'm thankful that we got an overtime. I'm thankful that we got the game. I think to kind of mirror something that I think Phil said earlier on, good luck to everybody that has to follow next weekend.
Yeah, I'm kind of in agreement with everything you said. I thought offensively it was two amazing performances. I did think defensively, I felt like the Bills missed tackles. And I suppose I only noticed that because, to your point, it's so uncharacteristic of the Bills to do that. And I mean, open field, the Tyreek Hills, the Pringles, the Chiefs have got the kind of players that can make you miss. But I thought missed tackles at key moments will be, the kind of thing that'll keep a few of that defensive roster awake at night. But your main point there, the thing I love is for two of the greatest quarterbacks we have in the league at the moment, and two guys with the potential to be right up there come the end of their careers as some of the greatest ever to do it, it wasn't too big for either of them, was it? That was the amazing thing, that in those big moments, it just felt like both of them had the most amazing control. Offensively incredible. Defensively, like I say, I just think the Bills are a better defense than the Chiefs. So I maybe expect more from them overall. But ultimately, your point about overtime, you got 60 minutes to get it done, right? Overtime isn't the fairest way, but then what is? I mean, do you let them play all night? You've got to do something to pick a winner. And a bit sad the toss of a coin felt quite so critical. But yeah, just what a game to watch as a neutral. PB, your thoughts?
Just on the coin toss point, I think if you look at every playoff game that's gone to overtime, 90% of the teams that have won the coin toss then go on to win the game. So it shows you how vital it is, and be that a touchdown or a field goal and then they get stopped, whatever, that there's got to be a better way of doing it. Play another full quarter or something like that. Each team has, I don't know. But then, like you say, you may end there up there, just let them play all night until one of them gets to stop. It's tricky, isn't it? But yeah, I mean, it was an unbelievable game. The last 2 minutes, I think, they scored 25 points or something like that. The lead changed hands 4 or 5 times. Absolutely bonkers. And to follow the finishes we saw to the Buccaneers and Rams game, you'd think that was enough excitement, but to then get that from the Rams and Bills, probably two of the teams that have got hot at the right time. I don't think, the Chiefs had a stinking start to the season. Yeah. The Bills were hit and miss. They were good one week, not so good the next. They had a couple of ropey games, but looked really strong at the weekend. And it was, what more can you say? It was a great game. A shame that there had to be a loser of that one. And, I'd have rather the Bills did it and progressed, but not to be.
Do you know, it's great when, in the NFL, there are, to the casual fan, there are superstars, right? There are superstar players that casual fans would know the name of. They're the guys who get the commercials on TV, all that kind of stuff. But if I mention Cooper Kupp being such a difference maker for the Rams, I mean, Travis Kelce in really important moments. I mean, I did think Tyreek Hill made plays and arguably had his best game of the year, actually, in a number. I don't know how the stat line compares to other games this season, but in that kind of game, I thought he made a difference. But Travis Kelce, goodness me, just at the times they need him to step up, he's phenomenal. And you know what, that record, it's 4 straight AFC Championship games now, isn't it? I think I'm getting that right. If I'm out by a year, right. Apologies. But I mean, that record is, pretty remarkable. I know they fell short to what the Brady Patriots early on in that run, but I mean, the Super Bowl winning season was amazing. Last season, it's such a pity the Super Bowl was a bit of a non-event in truth, but they are consistently doing it year on year, and Mahomes is, when he's in the zone, there just isn't anyone better, is there? I mean, his best is phenomenal. I mean, he can do things no one else can do. And I'd probably have, ironically, Josh Allen maybe half a step behind, and maybe the Aaron Rodgers of this world a step behind them. But yeah, what a performance in those final few seconds. So in terms of recapping, I think you could take all night talking about the Chiefs and the Bills particularly. But a final point, isn't it lovely to have a game like that I genuinely do think will go down in NFL history? And for it not to have a novelty. I think about things like the Music City Miracle, the Titans against the Bills, and the fact that it ends on that lateral and kind of almost a trick play. Isn't it just amazing that what we saw is 2 of the greatest players at quarterback in the NFL have one of their greatest nights against each other in a game that meant so much? I think that is just an amazing thing to take away. Well, yeah, I mean, if all the controversy is, overtime, how fair is it when Josh Allen doesn't touch the ball? I think you take that, don't you? It's literally 2 squads of players who, put on a hell of a show. But yeah, 4 games as good as you'll get, and 2 games, I think you said it, Phil, this weekend coming up that have an awful lot to live up to. But if that kind of rounds out our recaps, before we go...
I suppose the last point is...
go on, yeah.
Every game, either at the very end when the clock went 0 of the 4th quarter, was either tied or the field goal was going over to kick it.
Field goal wins
literally up to the last second of every game. What a sport! How bonkers is that?
Oh, I mean, it's amazing, and it also shows how good the really good teams are, because JB, you referenced it. Super Wildcard Weekend, we had blowouts. We had the Patriots looking ordinary, the Cardinals, those teams, the Eagles, who weren't quite up to it, got found out really quickly. And then look at the shows these 8 teams put on at the weekend. 2 very close games and 2 of the most exciting games you'll ever see, all wrapped into one weekend. I'm with you, PB. It is a sport like no other. So before we go, there's just the small matter of a little bit of the Club Dub Football Podcast's breaking news. Do you like our new snazzy news music? It's kind of playing as I talk now. So the news is that, talking about the greatest to ever do it, again, a Super Bowl winner and one of the most famed head coaches of recent NFL history, Sean Payton has decided to step away from the New Orleans Saints. So news reports are fresh as we are recording, but it seems that he has made the decision to step away. There seems to be reports suggesting he wants a break and all these things. But let's start with what it means for the Saints first, and maybe the broader NFC, and then we'll get to Payton himself. So, JB, how surprised were you by the news?
Incredibly surprised, so much so that when Phil shared this with us in our WhatsApp chat, other messaging services are available, I was absolutely convinced that he'd fallen for like Ian Rappaport or any one of those fake Twitter hoaxes that we all fall to at various points.
Spoofed Twitters, yeah.
Yeah, there had been some discussion of it yesterday. I think I'd seen the brief 15-second clip of owner Gail Benson being asked about Sean Payton and just kind of nervously laughing about the question, it seemed, and kind of saying, oh, well, we're going to see what we'll see, and thinking, well, that's weird. I mean, he's obviously not going anywhere. Okay, nope, that was wrong. I think in terms of where it puts the Saints in an interesting and potentially difficult situation because, again, to call back to the WhatsApp conversation we had, including Aldrin, obviously can't be with us recording here today. I posed the question of, are the Saints a good landing spot? And the universal response from Aldrin and Phil was no, which I absolutely agree with.
I'm with them.
I think in the same way that the Patriots managed to get so many amazing star caliber players to play for so little money back in the era, because it was like, do you want to go and make loads of money, or do you want to win a Super Bowl with Tom Brady and Bill Belichick? Sean Payton had to be an incredible part of the draw for players to go and play in New Orleans. And you saw that with kind of the work that he managed to do with Jameis Winston. Was Jameis Winston as good as Drew Brees? No. Was Jameis Winston better than what we saw play for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Yes, absolutely. You're both shaking your heads at me, and I think you're wrong. I'm not saying...
no, I'm with you. I think we talked about John Harbaugh doing it, didn't we? He elevates players and he improves players. But I think the bigger point, I mean, the reason I would agree with Phil and Aldrin is they have got cap room issues like you would not believe. And I think Payton, the fact they were even in the mix to make the playoffs with the year they've had, third string quarterback for half of their starts and so on, I mean, they are in a bit of trouble. Not a lot of cap room, aging roster. They've just paid, Taysom Hill was a great, Swiss Army knife of a player under Sean Payton. Is he now just a very expensive backup quarterback? All of these questions suddenly spring to mind. But yeah, I'm amazed. I mean, we've seen head coaches walk away before. I mean, then I was about to talk about Jimmy Johnson and Parcells. I'm going back maybe to another era. I suppose Kubiak, but then Kubiak, I don't know, but Payton in New Orleans is kind of part of the furniture though, isn't he? He's such a long-standing head coach. It does feel different to almost all of those.
16 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think the New Orleans Saints with Payton remain competitive. The New Orleans Saints without him have some decisions to make. Do you blow this up and start again? Do you? Yeah. I mean, I think it's there are a lot of decisions organizationally, let alone, just the appointment of the new head coach.
I think it's a real bad situation there because they've pushed cap money, down the road as well. So it's not even like they've got an expensive roster, but with some trades and stuff they can get out of it. Like this is money that they've kicked the can on. So that's, the GM's gonna have to do some pretty creative stuff as well. They've paid all that money to Taysom Hill. Their only other quarterback I think they've got signed is Ian Book, and he, didn't show anything in his brief appearances this season.
Doesn't look it, does he?
Would they re-sign Winston? I don't know, because there are a few teams potentially looking for a quarterback this year. And he was solid, if not unspectacular, before he got injured in his appearances. So. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be. I think that's the reason he's gone as well. I think 16 years. If he thought they were going to be competitive next year, I'm not so sure he'd have walked away. But, 16 years having been in one place, you might think, well, it's time for a rest or time for a change, rather than going through, a 3, 4, 5 year rebuild. So I think that says all you need to know, really.
I mean, there was always that talk, wasn't there, about the connection to the New York Giants? I mean, this is hot off the press, so this might be a lot clearer in the morning. But do we think he absolutely is walking away? Are we absolutely counting out? You mentioned it before we started recording, PB. In fact, both of you did. There's still a lot of vacancies without, new head coaches attached, even if there are some very strongly linked names. Is there no way he lands in another job?
So the interesting thing with that is the fact that Payton is under contract with the Saints until 2024. So even if this is a Bill Parcells type thing of retiring for a year or two and then moving to a team with a potentially better situation, a la Giants to what? Giants to the Patriots, Patriots to the Cowboys, etc. Whatever happens, either it's not going to happen until the 24-25 season, or teams are going to have to give up picks to get a coach like the Bucs had to do to get Gruden back in the day. I think that's the last one that I can remember happening. So that's going to be a thing. And I suppose it depends on how he feels. He's 58. So he's not like the new breed of coach like we're getting with like a Sean McVay or something like that they're talking about. But like, as we've all said, he's still an incredible mind for the game. So you've got to imagine that he's going to end up somewhere. We were all talking about how long does Mike McCarthy have at Dallas, and now add another year onto that, and the potential for Sean Payton to now be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. That seems spicy.
Couple of picks and $10 million would be money well spent to get Sean Payton in your building, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Jerry Jones would do that for like a pair of your socks or something. So
I believe it. And you say 58, you're right. He's not, the McVay, the Shanahan, the LaFleur, the Kingsbury to an extent. This guy, I suppose we've got young coaches in Cincinnati. There's lots of them around. But you look at Bruce Arians and the success he's still having. You look at Pete Carroll, who admittedly isn't quite, in charge of a stellar operation in Seattle anymore, but certainly he did good things at a much more advanced age than Sean Payton. I can't see him being out the game for what are we talking, 24, 25, 2 years, 3 years, whatever that is. I can't see him being out the game anywhere near that long. I think eventually once they've got a new head coach in place, let's say they hire Dennis Allen, from their DC, and a very good DC, but, and put him as head coach. Well, are they better having, Sean Payton under contract, or are they better having, 3 more picks this year and an extra $6 million in the bank? I don't know. I'm amazed he's gone in reality. But, what does it mean to that division? I hate to say this, Phil. How far are we away from Arians and Brady hanging up, cleats and clipboard, whatever the comparison would be?
There's the same talk this year as to whether that'll be it for Brady, and I don't think it will, because he deferred a lot of money on his signing bonus to this year. Yeah. So the Bucs would recoup about $16 million in cap space, I think, and Brady would lose about $12 million or something, something along those lines. I don't think you do that if you're not convinced that you're going to play this year, and I'm not sure that he'd want to go out the way that they've just gone. But we've got a tough schedule next year. So when you look at it division-wise, I'm not just, it's a really hard time to make massive predictions for next year, but I don't know if the Falcons will be much better next year. I don't know if the Panthers would be much better next year. The Saints, by the look of it, would be worse. So you'd think with the Bucs, with a Bucs hat on, that's hopefully, 5-6 wins that we can bank on for next year. And then even with a tough schedule, you only need to win kind of 4 or 5 more at the most to hopefully, get a good seed in the playoffs. So does that entice someone like Brady back? Arians has already said he's back next year, but I could see the day, he's retired once. So who's to say, next year is the last year of Brady, let's say, who's to say that Arians doesn't tie it up then as well? it could be kind of a big changing of the guard.
I think it is an especially interesting time to be in the NFC South. I've been quite positive, I think, about the Matt Rule experience. I think the Panthers have got a lot of good about them. And then
McAdoo.
Yeah, that was it.
Wow.
In an attempt to try and save his career after 2 really poor seasons, he's hired his mate, who wasn't a good OC at the Giants, wasn't a good head coach at the Giants, and could potentially be after his own head coaching job. It seems like a situation that's baffling. The Bucks, I kind of can't really add anything to our resident Bucks expert there. I think that was all very spot on. The thing that I think is going to make it especially interesting is talking numbers and talking cap numbers. So we're going to preface this by saying this is information as I'm looking at now at the wonderful overthecap.com, not a sponsor. Currently, anyone want to guess the team with the most cap space?
Is it going to still be the Jags? Although who had a lot last season and didn't spend much? Jags, Colts?
It is not the Jacksonville Jaguars. They are second. It is currently the Miami Dolphins.
Okay,
And the Miami Dolphins have projected 70 odd million to spend. And then if you take in what they call effective cap space, which is basically how much will they have once they've signed a minimum of 51 players to the roster, and that comes to 60 million. So take 10 million off that, 60 million, that's a decent thing to play around with. The Saints are bottom. The Saints currently are minus 74 million on the cap. And then when you take the effective cap of how much will they have when they sign 51 players to their roster, that takes it up to 77. This is a head coach that is going to have to come in and find a way to save $77 million on their roster before they can even talk about signing anybody new or retaining anybody that they've currently got. That situation is as absolute no win as you can. Interestingly, there are 8 teams that are currently in the red. The best of those 8 teams is the Falcons, who are a little under 5 million over the cap at the moment, which is also going to be a situation they're going to need to watch because the Falcons need to get better as well. Arthur Smith didn't have a bad season. He didn't have a good one, but it wasn't bad. Like when we were talking about potential head coaches that could go, I think we floated him as a name because they didn't win particularly well. But I don't think anybody was looking at that situation thinking he's definitely going to get the bin. So if the Falcons carry on improving, the Panthers stay static, the Saints have got huge mountains to climb. Like they've got to climb Everest and then Table Mountain and then Ben Nevis, but they're all stacked on top of each other.
It's a strong metaphor. I like it.
Thanks.
I think you're right. This could, because the weird thing is the way you save money is you release, well, ideally you trade away your most expensive players. But the problem is, what you've just described puts the Saints over a barrel, doesn't it? Bit like we've seen with teams in previous years. The Raiders will want us. It looks pretty bleak. I mean, I think it makes other jobs in the NFC look pretty appealing. And I think even outside of that division, I think if the Saints aren't perennial runners, you start to look at jobs like the Vikings and even the Bears, and you think, does someone going into those organizations have the ability to just turn them into a 9 or 10 win team and put them in the mix straight away? Because I don't think the Saints are back in that fold, for a season or 2 at the bare minimum. But anyway, we're going to do a special on coaches, potential hires by that point, but certainly we'll be looking in our crystal ball to see who might land where. What are we planning to do that next week? So at the moment, let's say that we will wave a fond farewell to everyone in Listenerland, round up our recap show. But worry not, everybody. We will be back for a slightly shorter than normal, only because we're down to 2 games, I suppose, slightly shorter than normal Pick'em show on Thursday, where we'll be putting our NFC and AFC champions elect into Club Dub. But gentlemen, 3 of us, I don't even think anyone would notice that someone was missing. In fact, who was missing? I don't know, his name escapes. Although we should give Aldrin a shout out, shouldn't we? So let's end with the big news for the weekend. JB, talk us through who did best in the Pick'em stats. And I have a feeling Mr. Aldrin was going to wish he was here.
Yes, we the three of us, we have a problem that we need to solve because we yet again had someone that did not falter at any hurdle. Phil and myself unfortunately brought up the rear this time, both going 1-3. Not a fantastic showing for us. It all came down to that Bills-Chiefs game, though. Rob taking the Bills ended with 3-1, and Aldrin picking the Chiefs went 4-0. So that means, as totals for the period so far, Rob is currently 7-3. Phil is currently 5-5. JB is 4-6, and Aldrin is 10-0.
So much to like about that. You referring to yourself in the third person, love it. But 10-0. I mean, he could have won himself a fortune, couldn't he? I mean, we don't condone betting.
No, he could have done it. It's just incredibly. I think he's got that laser focus that when there's only a certain number of teams, he can really zero in on what's happening.
And when he's not pulled by his heartstrings towards the Colts, maybe as well. Yeah. It's a stunning performance. 10-0 for Aldrin. See if the streak continues with our picks on Thursday, and you'll be able to catch up with Aldrin's additional picks on social media. But gentlemen, thank you for an amazing show. Let's catch up again and do it all on Thursday.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks a lot.
This is amazing. Woo!
Remember to subscribe
And be cool. Tell your friends.